Hello. I wasn't planning to talk about Trump and his tariffs this week, but having seen his performance in the Rose Garden yesterday, in which he announced tariffs on just about every country in the world, apart from Russia, of course, I felt I wanted to say a word or two. I think it was a very significant moment. I think, in the first place, it's historians will find it rather extraordinary that one man should have so much power that he alone could decide to take action which will seriously disrupt international trade and will affect billions of people throughout the planet. And I'm sure that gave him a great buzz because he likes to be the centre of attention, and that's the biggest centre of attention he's ever been. But the consequences of these tariffs are going to be really serious indeed. And I do think that this could be the beginning of the end of Trump. I made a video a few weeks ago which was viewed by more people than any other video I've ever made, and in that I said I thought he was finished. I thought that sooner or later, in the way that I predicted also that Boris Johnson wouldn't last, I just felt that this man is so reckless. He's so out of control now. He has no restraints whatsoever. Thinks he can do anything, and sooner or later he's going to slip up. And I think yesterday may be the point at which he began to slip up. And I'd like to talk a little bit about why this whole idea, this whole plan of imposing all these tariffs in order to, so he says, bring manufacturing back to America, why this is all so misguided, so crazy, so stupid, and will never, ever, ever work. And I'm surprised, really, that many people are taking it seriously. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of background, because I started my first business many years ago, back in the 80s, and I used to go to Italy, and I was dealing in what you might call giftware, the sort of things that gift shops sell. And I used to buy in Italy from lots of different artisans, because at that time, back in the 80s, they were everywhere in Italy. There were just thousands and thousands of artisans making stuff in marble and glass and wood and metal and whatever. And I used to buy from all these people. I'd come back to the UK and I'd sell all over the place, and it was doing pretty well. And after a few years, we noticed that goods were appearing on the market which were nice quality and extremely cheap, but they were from China. So I went off to China to see what was going on. And I remember the first time I arrived in Shenzhen, it was then a sort of scruffy little town, extremely poor, extremely scruffy, lots of beggars and so on, and really, really run down. And now, 40 years later, Shenzhen is one of the richest cities in the whole world. It has a population of 20 million. It's got, I think, 64 billionaires. It is the Chinese Silicon Valley. But anyway, I went to China, and I found that the goods there were very cheap, and the quality was very good. And so I started buying in China, and gradually stopped buying from Italy. And I was not alone. Thousands and thousands of people found that they could buy equivalent goods that they'd be buying in Europe, in China. And I think one of the secrets to the Chinese, the success of the Chinese, is that they understood the one rule that is more important than anything else in business, and that is keep the customer happy. So the prices were always spot on, and the quality was always good, and delivery was always on time. So it became very easy, and more and more people went to buy in China, and gradually the whole world ended up buying in China. I remember in the early days, I used to go to these factories, these great big factories with thousands of girls working, doing little tiny jobs, and they were all living in dormitories next door. They'd all come from towns all over China, in the countryside and so on, and they were being paid very little, and it was very sad and so on. But if you didn't buy from them, you weren't going to stay in business. But of course, 20, 30, 40 years on, I mean, these girls now, they're not working in factories anymore. They've all gone back to these new glittering cities that have been built all over China, and living probably very comfortable lives, provided they don't upset anybody. And a lot of the manufacturing has been mechanized, has been automated, and factories are much more modern now. And of course, all the sort of cheap labor manufacturing has gone off to places like Vietnam and Cambodia and so on. And so I and thousands and thousands and thousands of others transferred their supplies to China. And at the same time, of course, all the manufacturing in Europe, or so much of it, and again in America, it ceased to exist. Firms just closed down, and people who were previously making things would instead import copies and wholesale them, and the whole economy in the West changed. And I used to think, when I used to come back from China and I'd seen all this amazing sweat and toil that was going on there, and I'd come back to the UK, and it was sort of the 90s. It was the time when everybody was obsessed with buying designer clothes, and so everybody was out shopping, and people were buying new televisions and new cars and having 2 holidays a year in Spain. And I used to think, this is all going to end in tears. We've got this extraordinary imbalance here, whereby China's got a complete grip on manufacturing for the whole world. And this is what Trump wants to reverse. He wants to go back to manufacturing in America. And this is so misguided. It is so juvenile, so stupid. It's so utterly absurd. And it's not going to happen, and it won't work. If you think, for example, somebody is importing something or other from China, whatever it may be, it can be anything, a wheelbarrow. And the idea is to set up, put on 34% tariffs, so it's too expensive, and so someone should set up a factory in America making wheelbarrows. Well, how long does it take to set up a factory? You've got to design stuff, you've got machinery, you've got tooling, you need staff, you need management, you need training, you need people who know how to do it, you've got to find your premises, and then you've got to go through all the regulations about your premises and about your employees and about your business. You've got all this compliance to do and all the rest of it, and you're spending absolute fortune investing all this money. And at the end of it, because all of your costs are going to be so much higher than Chinese costs, you're going to be probably more expensive than the imported Chinese goods with the 34% duty. But on top of that, who's going to set up a manufacturing unit at a factory? Who's going to invest in a factory in America, knowing that Trump next month, 2 months' time, 6 months' time might say, "Oh, I'm doing away with all the Chinese tariffs"? I mean, nobody's going to do it. There's not suddenly going to be it's not as though there are all over America thousands and thousands of empty factories just waiting for someone to sort of, decide to start manufacturing again. The whole thing has to start from the beginning. And this transfer of manufacturing over to China has happened over years and years and years and years. It's been 20, 30, 40 years. It simply isn't going to happen. And think of this. I think this really explains it really quite well. Walmart, which is the biggest bricks and mortar retailer in the world, they have in America 4,700 stores, and they have a turnover of 500 billion. They say, according to their website, they've got something like 50 million different products that they sell one way and another. 50 million products. Now, 60% of everything they sell is made in China. So maybe 30 million items on their catalogue or whatever are made in China. So they're in a position now whereby, as from midnight last night, as I understand it, they're going to have to pay 34% on everything that's imported from China. Now, bear in mind that a firm like Walmart, they're going to be importing thousands of containers every week. Right now, there are no doubt thousands of containers arriving every day from China. And they're suddenly going to have to pay 34% on top of all those goods. Well, Walmart makes a net profit, that's after they paid their expenses, they paid the wages and everything, a net profit of 2.85%. So how are they going to pay 34% on top of the goods are costing them that are coming in now? I mean, it's absolutely obvious they're going to have to increase their prices for probably around 30%. And it's going to be hugely inflationary, and they'll have no alternative. There aren't the factories in America to supply goods, even at the same price, leave alone cheaper. So this is going to be hugely, hugely, hugely inflationary. And this is why I say I think it might be the beginning of the end of Trump. If you think he was elected on the basis that from day one he would stop inflation. And suddenly you're going to have inflation not 1 or 2%, you're going to have 30%, because it's not just Walmart that are buying the majority of their products from China, so will every other retailer in America, just about. everything you can think of is made in China. If it's not made in China, it's made in Vietnam, or it's made in Cambodia, or it's made in the Philippines, or wherever. And so this is so crazy, it's so ham-fisted, it's so stupid. If perhaps he'd been obsessed with this idea of getting manufacturing come back to America, if he said over the next 5 years we're going to phase in tariffs, they start at 2% and go up, firms could probably have worked with that. But when you bring in tariffs, I mean, some of the tariffs are way more than 34% that China are going to be subject to. It just isn't going to work. And what I think is going to happen is that, people will put up with a lot from the government. And when things are generally hard and cost of living is going up, it's difficult. It's very easy to blame COVID. It's very easy to blame Putin and the oil crisis and so on. But when there's one person who's responsible, when these prices go shooting up and everybody says, well, whose fault is it? There is only one person you can blame, and that's Donald Trump. And I think millions and millions and millions of people are going to say, we've had enough of this. This is not right. This man has damaged us so much. People are going to be going bankrupt. People are going to lose their homes. People aren't going to be able to afford to live. And this, as I said, this manufacturing is not going to happen. I mean, apart from anything else, that the other obsession of Trump is getting rid of all these so-called illegal immigrants or people without documents. There again, they're chucking out thousands and thousands of people. Well, if they're going to start manufacturing, where are all the workers going to come from? So the whole thing, to me, seems absolutely, utterly crazy. And another final thought on this is that there are going to be an awful lot of factories and firms in the Far East, in Southeast Asia, who are going to have an awful lot of surplus stock now because America's going to be importing less. And so there's going to be an awful lot of really, really cheap merchandise floating around the world, and that will affect other people. And it also will make it more difficult for the few Americans who are manufacturing to export anything, because they're not going to be able to compete with what is being produced in the Far East. The whole thing is completely mad, and it's just a creation of a guy who's lost it. He's lost it. He's so self-obsessed. This is a man who's said to work 45 minutes a day, who every weekend spends $3 million flying that enormous plane down to play golf in Mar-a-Lago. The guy's only interested in himself. And you could see, it was one of the rather shocking things I thought in the speech yesterday. He was kind of enjoying it. It was a bit of a joke and a bit of a laugh. And as I said at the beginning, this affects the lives of billions of people. Many, many, many people will lose their jobs, lose their businesses, and will be really struggling as a result of the inflation this is going to cause. The guy's crazy. I think, as I say, sooner or later, I think things will catch up with him, and he's going to be forced out. You see time and again now on social media, you'll see Republican congressmen and senators going back to the constituencies and giving speeches and being booed out of the place. And I think there'll be more and more of that. There might even be one or two ministerial resignations when things start to build up. But when you get really, really big demonstrations, I think Trump's going to find it very, very difficult. And although he might well resort to behaving irrationally and calling out the military and all the rest of it to control things, who knows? But I think he's going to find it very difficult to ever get over that stupidity of yesterday, which I think and hope he'll regret for the rest of his life. It's complete and utter madness. Anyway, that's what I think about it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd be grateful if you do so, or if you could, if you approve of what I say, if you could recommend my channel to other people, I'd be very grateful. And so until next time, thank you again, and bye for now.